The demands of modern life, coupled with all of the other stresses that come with it, can have a hugely negative effect on our health, which leaves one frustrated, depressed, and also possibly unable to cope in general. Today we're starting off the show with some self-love. The practice of self-care is said to be one of the essential tools that can assist us to stay calm, clear-minded, and also help us make decisions that contribute to a happier, healthier life. And to find out a little bit more about what self-care means and how we can go about creating daily routines around self-care is life coach and relationship expert Leah Sefor. Thank you so much for joining us for this great discussion. I think it's an important one,
Absolutely.
Especially at the moment.
Yeah.
What is self-care by definition?
In the way I see self-care is that it is living your life with impeccability and integrity and making daily choices that are getting you to live your life as the best version of yourself.
Right.
So it is putting yourself first, and it is moving very carefully through a day to pay attention to your energy levels, to your boundaries, to what you're giving away, and to where you are feeling fulfilled within your own life, and doing daily practices around that fulfillment.
Okay. Why is it such a missed opportunity, if I can call it that, that people don't engage in self-care, or they don't make it a priority at least, and then start to find that things become more and more challenging?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a combination of things. Number one, we've spoken before about destination addiction.
Yes.
And I think when people's focus is so far on what's happening tomorrow, where I need to be by next week, what's happening at the end of this month, it's almost that the present moment and the present health is sacrificed for what's going to be coming. So people don't do a check-in with themselves, which is a very important first step to take, is even if you've got to schedule it in with yourself once a week,
yes,
to have a how am I feeling, check in what's worked for me this week, what hasn't worked for me this week, where have I let my boundaries drop a bit. So people are not good with boundaries. They're always focusing too much on tomorrow, and a lot of people are raised to believe that other people's needs are more important than their own.
Yes.
So I have to make sure that my boss is happy, my partner's happy, my kids are happy, and only if there's energy left at the end of the day, then I'm allowed to have that for myself.
Yes.
Because people think that self-care is selfish. And people don't want to be thought of as being selfish, because that's not a good trait to have, and it's a necessary trait to have, because if you're not functioning, then nothing else in your life will be. How
often should you say, I'm going to dedicate X amount of time for self-care, or is it something that you need to gauge where you are mentally?
Look, I think it's a combination of daily, weekly behavior. I think at least every day you have to be enhancing a spiritual and emotional check-in practice with yourself, whether you are doing prayer, meditation, mindfulness, daily ritual around meal times, daily ritual around conversations with family, and especially taking time out. If you're living with people, if you are overwhelmed with work, a daily practice of just going somewhere for 15 minutes to be by myself is necessary. Maybe a weekly check-in with yourself is a far more overarching check-in of how am I with work, how am I with money, how am I with family, how am I with myself and my energy levels. So I would never let a week of my life go by without doing a check-in of where I have been a bit lax with my self-care. Okay.
Now, is there a negative side to self-care in terms of people using it potentially as some kind of way to cop out of life in general?
Absolutely, and I'm seeing this a lot, is that people are just feeling completely overwhelmed by what is going on, and so they want to just stay in bed. And I fully agree with taking the necessary time to rest and recuperate, but if you are doing it all the time and you keep using it under the guise of self-love and self-care, but what you're actually doing is checking out. You're not showing up in your own life, you are not being present in your relationship, you are not participating in stuff with your children, and you're not showing up to do your job properly. That's not self-love, that is exactly, it's an excuse. It's checking out. So just be careful that you're not using self-love or self-care as a reason to not be showing up in your life.
What are some tips and tricks to give yourself a bit of self-care when you have a hugely stressful environment overall?
Okay, so I think that there's 5 areas people need to focus on when it comes to self-care: your spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and technology.
Okay.
So like I've said before, with your spiritual, it is just checking that you are connecting with yourself, meditation, prayer, mindfulness exercises. From an emotional perspective, it is really people are keeping a lot of their emotional stuff suppressed. They're not speaking their truth to their partners. They're not confronting unworkable behaviors with their colleagues and people at work. And they're not making space for their children to share their emotional fears and worries and concerns. So make the time emotionally to just check in with the people people in your life.
Okay.
You know, work with a coach, work with a therapist. Most coaches and therapists are doing Skype or Zoom sessions at the moment, so that's accessible.
Yes.
From the mental perspective, what I'm finding with this whole pandemic is that people allow themselves to be bullied out of a opinion, a belief system, or a point of view, because they stand in their own point of view, and then they read something online, and then they allow themselves to be bullied out of that. So I'm saying just hold strong to what you believe, hold strong to your opinions. They're valid and you're entitled to them.
Yeah.
Allow the room for admitting maybe you are wrong. Allow the room for learning. But with mental stuff, it's really also about reading, learning, growing. People right now are having to learn how to adapt their businesses to survive.
Yes.
And for that, you've got to apply a lot of planning and a lot of organizing of how am I going to now do webinars? How am I going to improve my social media brand? How am I going to do all of that? So mental self-care is addressing that. Physical self-care, I think everybody knows, is eating and exercising.
Yes, yeah.
So some movement of some kind, and just make sure you're eating properly. Again, a lot of nutritionists, dietitians are doing Zoom calls and Skype sessions. You can see them, speak to them to get a plan of action.
Yeah.
But the number one thing for me right now at the moment during the pandemic is people's inability to put boundaries in place with technology.
Yes, yeah.
It is from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, and it is phone, computer, constant meetings, constantly online.
Always connected.
Whew,
Yeah.
it's overwhelming, and when you are constantly following news feeds, that just fills you with like that universal fear and stress and worry that is going on. People don't have a boundary as to, is it genuinely my feeling, or am I taking it on because it's everybody else is feeling that way?
Yeah.
So self-care is taking a big step back, getting some objectivity going, and going, I get that you're in this space, it's not my truth.
Yeah.
I get that that's what's happening outside there. For my reality, it's not happening with me. And just having a bit of perspective is really necessary. Otherwise, people just take on all the stress and just get carried away with it.
It's not that you're saying that self-care is just dropping everything, sitting in the corner and being dead quiet.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of action in it.
Yes.
But it's about making the space to be able to process all of these things that you've got to deal with.
Yeah, and compartmentalizing is important. If you're trying to do everything at the same time, this is where everybody is feeling that overwhelm. Is I'm trying to do everything and be everything for everybody else, and I don't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
So that is where the rest and the taking a time to have a hot bath and going to bed early and reading rather than watching TV and traditional self-care techniques are incredibly important, but not to be used, like we said just now, as checking out.
Yes, yeah.
If you know an area of your life is not okay, the greatest self-love is to make it work.
Okay.
Not just disassociate and check away from it. Just go, this is not working for me. What am I going to do? Because otherwise your brain's not going to rest when you try and sleep at night. You're going to be churning of all the problems that you haven't resolved in the day.
Absolutely.
So yes, you're absolutely right. Self-care is action. It is getting into action to change what is not working.
Okay. And spiritually, I mean, you mentioned meditation a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
What are some practices that are useful in self-care and creating a bit of space for yourself?
If you are spiritual, it is the journeying within, doing yoga, doing meditation.
Yes.
Mindfulness is applicable to both spiritual and religious paths. I have to say that I'm a big fan of going to your car, because I think people live in a home where they can't get away from people in their lives.
Yeah.
There isn't a separate room that they can retreat to, and they cannot find silence. So your car is actually a fantastic place to go and sit. It's quiet, it's silent. You can play music, you can download podcasts, you can download guided meditations. If you don't know how to meditate, download a guided meditation that walks you through a meditation practice. And just daily ritual around how you bath, around how you eat, around how you spend time with people. We tend to just get through it and return to the art of ritual in a daily basis.
I like that, because it actually also, earlier you mentioned having dinner with your family, things like that, which are parts of our lives. It doesn't have to be hugely different, but if you just do it consciously and with a bit of purpose, and to know that it's also time, it's a safe space to chat about things and get things out, it's a hugely helpful thing without making huge changes necessarily. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Absolute pleasure.